Hello, welcome to Creativity Boost Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence and creativity. Specifically, how do emotions influence creativity? And I have on the show today someone who has done a lot of research on the body of knowledge around emotional intelligence. She has also been recognized by the United Nations Global Compact Committee for her work in researching emotional intelligence. Her name is Rhonda Parker Taylor. Hi, Rhonda. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing today? It's so
I'm doing
nice
so
to
good.
collaborate with you again, and I can't wait to get into a good discussion.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to have you on the show. And I think that we're going to be able to unpack this conversation in such a unique way. So, just to kick us off, I'd like you to tell us a bit about why you ventured into that research on emotional intelligence.
When I originally started looking into emotional intelligence, I did it after reading one of Daniel Goldman's book and research, and then one of Case Western's most famous professors, Dr. Baraskis. I'm probably going to slaughter his name, and I'm so sorry. But and I really found the idea that your right brain function, which is your creative side, was just as important or even more important to a person's success than a person's IQ. This whole concept that creativity creates a more successful model for leaders or individuals really excited me. One, because throughout my academic life, even though I have a doctorate, I wasn't known to being the brightest bulb in the bunch. It wasn't like I was a mathematician or, good in economics. So the thought that my creative and my soft skills
Hmm.
was just as important to success as someone's high IQ, if not more important, excited me.
Wow.
So this made me want to really dive into, or as AI would say, delve into the idea of, why would those soft skills be and creative side of your brain be so much more important than the IQ? Because all our lives in academics, especially and when you're in school, you hear about how your math skills and your science skills are the most important model for success. But then you run into people all your life that have very high IQs and they have no social skills. And they have, or not everybody. Obviously, we never would want to stereotype that, but you've run into people that model has carried them through success of academics. But, when it comes to becoming a leader or applying it, that's not what they have to lean into. They have to lean into their creative side. So if you look into both the emotions and the creative, and the creativity side and put them together, what ends up happening is you have components to create ideas.
Hmm.
So when I did the emotional intelligence study with the multinational leaders, we decided what we wanted to find out first is we wanted to test that idea.
Hmm.
Does the EQ, which is the emotional intelligence quotient, have a component in success and how a leader faces the world? So we did two populations. The first was the multinational leader, the one that goes from country to country. The participants in these worked in more than 3 countries, and then we did the domestic leaders, and we wanted to make sure it was culturalized, so it wasn't just United States. It was people that were domestic leaders only in one country and multiple different countries to make sure it wasn't just a U.S. model.
Hmm.
And in doing that, we found that the multinational leaders had the higher EQ than the domestic leaders. Okay, you can say, okay, that makes sense, because they're going from place to place. But then, except for in one category, self-impression of self. The domestic leader thought higher of themselves as a leader than the multinational leader. So we had to kind of look into what this meant to the study. Why do domestic leaders think more of themselves and have a higher opinion of themselves and their decision making than the multinational leader? And what we found, as with a result in reality testing, was that the domestic leader wasn't as creative. They thought more of their decisions, that they didn't include others. So it was like the big fish in a small pond syndrome, where they were, they thought so much of themselves that they excluded people from the decision-making models that they had in their organizations a lot of times. So this was a big, important component to realizing that, leaders should go through emotional intelligence training. They need to know what the 21 characteristics are. They need to know that to generate creative ideas, whether it's individually or for their organization, you have to generate the best way possible to dealing with everybody's emotions in the organization, and watch out for idea hoarding. We all have ideas, and sometimes we practice the spiral of silence, not sharing our creative ideas because the leaders squash them. So diversity of the ideas is a big component of creativity. And it's also innovation, scientific, and all the other aspects of models that are important not only to business, but into creating leadership, home life, in almost every aspect of life.
Wow, that's such a robust response, and I really like the why that you gave us, the motivation, because it actually also excites me when I hear that even in the corporate world today, when organizations are looking for talent, they are now not so much big on the intelligence quotient of the talent they seek, but rather they are seeking people who are creative. In fact, creativity is one of the top 3 most sought for skills according to the World Economic Forum. Across industries and across geographies, creativity is considered one of the top 3 skills that is being sought for by recruiters and by hirers and by organizations. That speaks to the fact that intelligence is good, being book smart is good, but with creativity, even if you did not pass off as someone who was book smart, if you hone into your creative ability, into your creative side, which has a link, which has a direct connection to emotional intelligence, it will take you farther than even your traditional education can take you. And so I really appreciate that perspective that you've set for us. Now, I want to also say something with regards to the connection between emotions and creativity, because I believe someone listening out there may be wondering, what does emotional intelligence even have to do with creativity? Well, from what I've observed and from listening to you, Dr. Rhonda, I would say that emotions can be classified as, the energy that causes people to get into motion, right? Because your emotion is what moves you into action. People do things for one reason and one reason only, because they feel like doing it, because they are moved to doing it. So creativity is what gives individuals the ability to move people with their skill, with their knowledge, with their ideas. There are many people who are gifted with skills, ideas, knowledge, and experience, but they don't know how to use those things to move people in a particular direction, to lead people in a particular direction, to stir them up to action, right? And that's where emotional intelligence is game changing. Now, having set that foundation, what would you say is one fundamental way that we can develop emotional intelligence, knowing that the more emotionally intelligent one is, the better the person is able to move people in a particular direction by giving them what they want to do, but giving them that thing for the right reasons, so that it's like a win-win situation.
Okay, so I would like to kind of rewind to the whole conversation you just said, because it's very important what you said. First, you have to embrace your own uniqueness. When you embrace your own uniqueness and you're self-aware, which self-aware is one of the very first important aspects of the whole process of emotional intelligence. When you embrace your uniqueness, you're able to appreciate others' uniqueness. So the model for emotional intelligence and monitoring self is self-awareness, self-regard, and stopping and regulating the emotion that's coming up in you when someone brings you ideas, brings you thoughts, challenges your thoughts. And when you do that, you are self-aware enough to say, okay, I'm unique, I have my own perspective. Somebody else is unique and they have their own perspective, and they may compete or clash, but that's okay. Because that's the whole process of creativity, is collaborating. So when you bring that all together and you regulate your own emotions, because somebody else, you can't guarantee that everybody in the room has practiced and developed their emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah.
So you have to self-regulate self. That requires the control. Being driven to a goal can overcome the emotional intelligence and take over, because you become so competitive, or you want your way, or you want to express your opinion so hard that if you don't self-regulate that, you're squashing creativity. Whereas if you can self-regulate self, and hopefully the other people in the room will do the same, but you can't guarantee it. When you self-regulate self, you can start navigating and influencing others. So start looking for the win. Listen. Active listening of what the other people's opinions or thoughts, or even their emotions. Why are they feeling attacked? Why are they feeling defensive? Why are they arguing so hard for their thoughts? Listen, and then look at the motivation that you guys have the same goal. And when you have the same goal, then you practice that other part of emotional intelligence, which is empathy. Whatever their fear is, we get emotional for a variety of reasons, but most of them have a core foundation of fear. Fear of loss of power, fear of loss of position, fear of not being heard, fear of not being able to leave your mark in the world. Whatever it is, that emotion typically takes over when you're in negotiations with people. So you have to then pull that self-regulation to motivate people to collaborate. And when you do that, it allows people to connect. And when people connect, then they're like, well, wait a minute, your idea and my idea kind of go together if we do this. And you start twisting the ideas around to where your idea and their idea are both included in some aspect. Maybe one's at the beginning, one's at the end. It comes into a whole new model of whatever the idea is. and it's typically better because two brains are always better than one.
Wow, that's really cool. And now I'd like us to take it another step further into the impact of emotional intelligence on creative individuals. Like we've just spoken about how emotional intelligence impacts creativity in the area of being sensitive to people, being able to move people in a particular direction, or set them in motion. Now I want us to look at the impact of emotional intelligence on the creative as an individual. And why did I bring us in this point of our discussion? The reason I did that is because I've come to discover that, as we all know, there's two sides to an emotion. There's positive emotion and there's negative emotions. There's emotions of joy, there's emotions of happiness, there's emotions of confidence, there's emotions of peace, there's emotions of, there are different kinds of positive emotions. There's emotions of anticipation, there's emotions of satisfaction, all the feelings that accompany all these different experiences. They have their own unique emotions. There's also the negative side of emotions. There's emotions of doubt. There's emotions of fear. There's emotions of anxiety. There's emotions of disbelief. There's emotions of unbelief. There's emotions of confusion. There's emotions of intimidation. There's emotions of low self-esteem. Every of these qualities and attributes, they go with their own unique emotions, right? And as we said earlier, emotions set people in motion in a particular direction, right? People get moved to do something or to not do something based on how their emotions are, working at that time. It shouldn't be so, but that's just the way we are. That's just the way humans are. Are there ways that we can gain mastery of our emotions? I believe so, and we'll talk about that in subsequent questions. But I want us to talk about how can a creative individual regulate their emotion so that instead of the emotion working against them, it works for them. It sets them into motion to do the right things. And I'll give you an example. For example, there's a creative individual who has a big idea. Maybe an idea to write a book or to build a product that will serve people, and the person is scared of doing it. That's an emotion right there. And so because the person is scared of failing or is scared of doing it or is anxious that he will fail, the person never takes action. There's an individual who has an idea to write a book and doesn't even know that when he writes that book will turn into a bestseller, or when she writes that book, it will turn into a bestseller. But because of the doubt and the emotions that accompany that doubt, anticipation of failure, that person never takes action. That person never does what needs to be done, and then that person procrastinates. In fact, this is the underlying cause of procrastination. So how can a creative individual leverage emotional intelligence to put themselves in the right place that they should be, put themselves in the zone where they want to create what they should be creating, and where they find themselves, producing the things they should be producing the results, tapping into their potential like they should?
First, you're talking to the choir. And what I mean by that is, I think everybody, no matter where they are in their lives, has self doubt. You would think at my age, and you'd say, oh, you're mature enough, you don't have self doubt, you don't have vulnerability. But, even with my bestseller, it sat on my desk for probably, after I wrote it, a couple of years.
Wow.
Because I was afraid to let it go. So I just had all these busy projects that I was still working on, and I had to have an accountability partner say, why haven't you published? And I said, well, because, I've got this project on, and you see, you're right. Emotions will take you, it will petrify you, it will stop you, and you will never live your purpose because you haven't gotten a hold of your impulse control, which is one of the characteristics of emotional intelligence. So you could be on all the other scales high. You could have self-regulation, you could have self-awareness, self-regard for others, empathy. You could have all these wonderful characteristics, but not have impulse control of your emotions. And when you don't have impulse control, there's two things that happen. Either you're off with every, tea time for golf, or, and you're not staying focused, or running, because like you said, the emotions of fear, or you're going off unhinged. And one of those unhinged emotions is the fact that you become still to a point that you're not getting anything done. So impulse control goes both directions. You're either way off and at every party, or you're in the bed because you're petrified of living. And so what I would suggest to them first is you have to put positivity and into your model to regulate. So, when I started, I said self-awareness, stop, listen, evaluate, right, and regulate. When you're in that model, your art form, your creativity is an outlet for allowing you to analyze. So use that artwork, whether it be physical artwork, you maybe, a painting or writing or journaling, whatever that physical practice to identify the emotions. You have to identify why you've stopped. I have an accountability partner, and that accountability partner said, no, it's not because you're too busy. All your other projects are getting out the door. It's because you have fear and vulnerability. And so that accountability was able to foster my own autonomy, which is another characteristic of emotional intelligence. You have to have autonomy to regulate self to be successful. Autonomy is independence. So once you've put all the factors together, and if there's other people involved, you've done the collaboration, you have to be willing to have independence to make the decision. And the decision in the case of creativity that's stopping them or not following your purposes, I have too many other things going on to make this decision, to make this step. But really, it's that emotion that I'm fearful of being a failure. I'm fearful of being left behind. I'm fearful that I won't get it done. I don't have the people in front of me. So that fear, leaves you in a petrified or a, state where you're not moving forward. But really, you have to have the next emotional intelligence characteristic. I've pinpointed the autonomy to make the decision, but you have to have assertiveness. And assertiveness allows you to advocate for your own creativity. And that means you have to believe in yourself, and it doesn't matter if it becomes a bestseller. You accomplished something someone else never did.
Yeah.
You accomplished what your goal was. And there, every day as a writer and a researcher, someone says, "Oh, I want to write a book." How did you do it? You gotta, you have to practice those daily focused events to be prepared and get things done. But you have to have the autonomy to make the decision, and you also have the assertiveness to put it into practice and put it out there. Create the plan. Be an advocate for yourself. Nobody can sell your work better than you. And a lot of times, in the writing industry, at least, if you're not out there talking to people, you're not, it's never not going to be a bestseller.
Wow, that's so cool. And while you were speaking, something just popped up in my head. Being emotionally unintelligent paralyzes action. It paralyzes creativity. And that's why emotional intelligence is super important that everyone hones, right? And everyone, I
Right.
believe, has that ability because God put those emotions in us so that we can use it for good. But obviously, everything that can be used for good can be abused, right? So it behooves us to really understand how to use our emotions to set ourselves into motion in the right direction. And speaking of that, that brings me to the question I earlier spoke about that I would reference in our upcoming conversation, which is how do you gain mastery of your emotions, or how can I gain mastery of my emotions? Because I've heard people say, oh, you need to master your emotions. And mastery, as far as I'm concerned, mastery is the ability to execute without the use of conscious resources. That means you are able to put your emotions on that check without even thinking, without flinching, as though you're lacing your shoes. So how can I get to that point in my emotional intelligence journey so that I can be more creative?
I would say first and foremost, you have to understand yourself. You have to know what your triggers are. Why do you fight so hard for certain things and don't worry about other things? Actually, kind of journal where the different emotions come from, when you, whether it be anger, fury, excitement, happiness. Where does that core come from inside of you? Once you understand yourself, then you can start understanding others, because you need to know what their core values are. And you have to build tolerance into your model. One of the 21 characteristics of a person with high emotional intelligence is they have tolerance for others. So if you have tolerance, and when I say tolerance, I'm kind of talking about the ability to see other people's point of views, see their culture, see their openness and openness to experience. Let them show you, look at it from different perspectives. You may be the only person that you have to worry about. Maybe you're in your own world creating something and you're like, okay, I'm all tensed up. Okay, why are you tense? Then if you journal about the tense, is it because you don't think it's right? Is it because you're excited? Is it because something just is amiss? If you journal, or if you decide what's going on here, why is this emotion coming, then you can express it in a different way. So it might come out in your art form, it might come out in your creativity, it might come out in your business meeting. You have to be open to the experience, not only of others, because open to experience could be a food. You want to try something different, or your partner wants you to try something different. You're like, oh, that looks awful, I couldn't try it. So, why have you put the stop there? An emotionally intelligent person is open to experience. So if you're doing a creative process, whether it be innovation, that's engineering, or a book, or an art form, or music, whatever it might be, when you're open to experience, you can see the shift and improvement in the process of what comes out in the final product. When you narrow the scope and you close the openness to only the one experience or the whatever's in the room, you lose that ability to be emotionally impactful, not only to self but to others.
And I like how you just ended your response, because that is leading me to my next question, which is how do you regulate? How do you self-regulate, like you've already established, when you find yourself in an environment that chokes positive emotion, that instills negative emotion, that instills doubt, instills anxiety, or you're sharing your goals, you're sharing your visions, your aspirations with anticipation and joy and belief. You're sharing this with people who are dear to you, with your friends, with your loved ones, and you find that the environment is dampening your positive energy and is, impeding your momentum, is causing you to lose that positive energy and making you to cave into a negative a negative expectation, a negative vibe. How do you come out of that, especially when that is an environment you find yourself in a constant frequency?
Well, you're really asking two questions in one there.
Then go for it.
One is you, the person, and other is the person that's providing the negative part of the feedback.
Okay.
So my model that I would suggest first, because remember the first step is stop, listen, is to ask the fact-finding question. Why do you feel that way? Do you know, what's your fear in me trying this? What is your thoughts? Do you have a better one? And listen to what comes from the other person. Now, some people, when they do that, they may have some valid fears that need to be addressed in what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it may take that you have to take a step back and listen and then step away because your emotions are all tangled up and, you know, you got to sort through them. But, you know, I would take that model and listen to it and then run it through, you know, some kind of creative process on your own and say, okay, what is valid about these emotions? And always acknowledge that other person's feelings and their emotions, because no matter whether they're in reality or just fear-based, they're valid to them.
Yeah.
So the person that is in that creative, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make this change and I'm going to do that. And all of a sudden this other person that's in the room, whether it be a coworker, a peer, a child, a relationship, a boss, is like, no, stop, that doesn't work. And really, you know, squashes it and slams their foot down on it. When you ask those questions and you validate, okay, I see what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. And my first instinct to acknowledge how you're feeling is to argue my point, but give me a second and let me really think about those thoughts. And then let's rejoin again and talk about it. And you can even express why you feel like you have to take a step back. You know, those are valid thoughts, but they're not my thoughts. And, you know, if you're the decision maker, you still have to make that person isn't going to come along with you until you come to an agreement. So trying to move ahead, whether they are on board or not, isn't going to work. It doesn't matter whether it's your business life, a creative project that you're working on the side, a relationship in your family, a peer. If you don't come to a consensus in this decision and in this process, it's not going to work, even if you're the sole decision maker. Because it is going to continually be brought up as a problem in whatever context it's in. So you have to not only exercise the independence, but you also have to exercise regard for others, which is really all the way back up to step one, which is stop, listen, and sort through the problem. You'll never get past, you know, the first base in a creative project with your team, whatever the team is, without addressing the emotions of the other. That's what emotional intelligence is all about, is getting everybody on that same page, being disciplined about it, showing emotional experiences for other, showing the independence, showing the interpersonal relationships, and fostering the autonomy in the whole creative process, which means the one that's either maybe a peer, a subordinate, a boss, you know, a relationship of any sort, you have a social responsibility to carry them through the change process. So you have to listen to them, and it's up to you to regulate your own emotions. Now, you can try to teach them how to see it your way and motivate them to see it your way. But until you regulate your own emotions to be able to talk to them and collaborate with the other person in a manner that makes sense to their emotions, then you're not going to get anywhere. You have to acknowledge their emotions, and then I would use almost a change model to get them to unfreeze, freeze, back to a new model. So typically when there's a change, they have to acknowledge everything. They have to see where your point of view is, and they may never agree emotionally on it, but then you try to get them to refreeze into the process of the change.
Wow, that is such a great response. And that brings me to my final question. We started off this conversation with the research you did, and you spoke about how you did some study on leaders, domestic leaders, national leaders. If you were to give one piece of advice to leaders out there on how they can be emotionally intelligent and how they can leverage that for creativity and problem solving in their leadership journey, what would that be?
Know your team. How can you make decisions for others if you don't know your team and what their needs are? Emotions require you to stay disciplined and stay focused, not only for self, but for others. So if you want to build that model that's going to be successful for the organization, every organization, their goal is to make money. It doesn't matter if it's a large multinational company or a mom and pop company making coffee or flipping pizzas, right? Everybody wants to make money.
Yeah.
That's the organization can't thrive if it doesn't make money. But emotional intelligence builds the people in the organization to help them understand how they fit in the organization to make the organization and themselves successful. That's a model that works. If the individual working in the organization or on the creative project does not know how they fit, they will never be self-actualized. So if you look at Maslow's law of motivation, you start with everybody's needs. In a podcast recently, I was talking about, a lot of times we think of these big reward programs and motivational programs where, we say, oh, we're going to send you to Ruth Chris for dinner. Well, if a employee wins that reward, but their car doesn't run, or they don't have the tip money, that's not a reward. That's a penalty. So why aren't you celebrating those that are making you successful, showing that you're emotionally self-aware not only of what your needs are, but that of the people of your organization? Understand your emotions and how they influence the creative process and the ability of your organization to thrive. Channel the emotions and insights into the work so that the organization can thrive. We know the organization wants to thrive because we'd all be out of work. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you want to have job stability, the organization has to thrive.
Yeah.
But you don't do it in a manner that takes away the creative process or the creative boost of the organization. So you have to be open to hearing, listening, and experiencing what those around you are experiencing.
Wow. Thank you so much for all your wonderful thoughts and responses on emotional intelligence and creativity. I believe that this is a very good place to bring our conversation to a close. And I want to believe that the listener out there, you listening to us out there, you found this really, really inspiring. You've gained one or two things that will propel you to your next level in your creative expedition. And so on this note, we're going to say thank you for listening. Do well to share this, like, follow, drop comments if you enjoy the conversation, or if you have questions, or if you have topics that you would like us to, talk about in our upcoming episode. But thank you for listening once again, and I'll see you in my next episode. And so till next week, till next episode, see you when I see you. Have a good one.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.